we go from average to awesome. I want to welcome you to our second module in our Nobody is Born Average course. As you know, we are taking a journey from average to awesome. And our last session, if you haven't watched, let me just say this. If you haven't watched the first module on apathy, I would encourage you to stop this video right now. Stop and go back and watch the first module on apathy, because each of these modules are going to build on the other one that precedes it. So I want you to make sure you're up to speed. Make sure you have your notebook, your workbook. We're going to be working through some things today that I think are going to be beneficial. Our desire, the purpose, the goal of this course is to make sure you understand how important it is to recognize who you are and what you were created to be. Now, this first half of this course deals with the subject of average, and we are going through letter by letter what causes an individual to become average. The premise of Nobody is Born Average is simply that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Psalm 139, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. All of us were born with promise, potential, and yet somewhere in the course of life, we tend to slip back into a realm of average. So the point that I'm trying to make and reemphasize with great emphasis is that you and I were created for a lot more than what we currently are seeing in our lives. So I'm glad you've joined us in the second module. Today, we are dealing with the letter V. The second letter in average is the letter V. And today I want to talk to you about voices. Every single day, you and I are bombarded by voices, whether it be media, whether it be friends, whether it be the internet, whatever. We are bombarded by voices that are trying to persuade us in one direction or the other. Think about this for just a moment. Pause and maybe even write some of this down in your workbook that is provided for you in this course. There's room there for notes, so I want you to just kind of maybe take a moment and write some things down. I want you to identify what you are listening to that's trying to keep you locked behind the bars of average. You have my permission. You can go ahead and stop this video right now and write down at least 3 things, just 3. Because if we did this, we could probably go all day, but just write down 3 things that you are hearing that may be keeping you in a prison of going beyond. So let's just kind of stop for a moment, write those 3 down, and I'll be here when you get back, okay? All right, stop the video now and write down 3 things that you are hearing that may be limiting you. Awesome. Glad you're back. I want you to keep those in your mind as we go through this lesson together. I believe that too many people simply accept whatever environment they're born into or believe about themselves from the voices that have been speaking into their lives. They think it's normal, and as a result, they start to believe they don't have any other choices, any other options in life. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the purpose of this course is to help you break free from this grip of average and focus on what is potentially the place that you can move into. And we're going to do that by kind of honing in, if you will, on voices that kind of keep you pushed down, pressed down. And I want you to identify, in this course, I want you to identify what you're hearing, the voices that may be attempting to keep you from becoming what you are created to become. Now, I only have one hand. I don't know if you knew that or not, but I only got one hand. So I try to do a lot of things based on this hand right here. If you can see that, focus in there. Woo. 5 voices that I want to talk about over the next few moments that maybe, possibly, pretty much can be voices that are hindering and limiting you. And the first one is just that. It's the voice of limitations. Now, I've heard this voice in my life personally a lot. I want to tell you a story. Many of you may have heard this story, but I want to tell you about my first grade teacher. I grew up, of course, with only one hand, and every once in a while, now let me back up. When I was born in Pendleton, Oregon. When I was born, it was, kind of a story in that small town. Hey, there's a kid born with one hand. And so someone heard about it and they inducted me into the Shriners. Anybody know what the Shriners are? It's those guys that wear those fuzzy hats and ride around in go-karts and parades. As a result of being in the Shriners, I was fitted with a prosthetic from the time I was born till about 11 or 12 years old. And I remember when I was in the first grade, I had a prosthetic. I called it a hook. It was one of those, you've seen them. They open up and close. I would pull, kind of do a motion like that, and it would open. It was great for pinching girls. And in first grade, all girls have cooties, so that's kind of what you did. But I remember I wore it to school one day, and me and a buddy of mine were out on the playground. And I jumped for a ball, and he did at the same time as one of those kick balls, and we were on the same team. And I jumped for it as he did, and my hook accidentally jabbed his lip, and blood started coming out. And I'm looking at it like, man, this thing rocks. This is awesome. But my first grade teacher didn't see it that way. I'll never forget, we were in Salinas, California, the Los Padres Elementary School, first grade. Everything in California, if you've been around California, a lot of the schools are outside. And I remember being pulled out after recess into the outdoors area around our classroom. And my teacher, I don't even remember her name, but my teacher pointing her finger in my face and say, I never want to see that on your arm again. How dare you bring something that could injure people? By the end of the day, she had wrote a note to my parents, put it in an envelope, sealed it, gave it to me and said, make sure you give this to your parents. And I remember going home, and I was upset, of course. I'd just been called out by the teacher. I've been made fun of. I've been reminded that I have limits. And I gave the note to my dad. My dad opened it up and read it. Never told me what that said. Never told me what the note said from my teacher. He simply picked me up, put me on his lap as tears were streaming down my face. And he said, Darren, I don't care what this says. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. Don't let anything or anybody limit you. And I kept that with me. I know it's a distant memory now, but I remember it so vividly in my life. Fast forward just a few years, we moved, right in the middle of my fourth grade year, we moved from Salinas, California to Kimberly, Idaho, a little cow town outside of Twin Falls, Idaho. The only fun thing you could do in that area was tip cows. And that's how bad it was. It was small, tiny. And I remember coming into that fourth grade year, as I mentioned, right in the middle of the school year, everybody had already formed their friend groups. Everybody was doing their thing. I wanted to play football on recess one day with all the guys, but they wouldn't let me play because I'm shorthanded. And I remember going back to the classroom after recess, collapsing on my desk. I am crying like a baby, okay? A student that sat next to me, her name was Shelly. Shelly got up, went and told my fourth grade teacher by the name of Mr. Jenkins what had happened. Nobody would let me play. I was upset. And I remember sitting back there at my desk, my head down. I'm crying. Tears are running. I'm sorry to gross you out. Snot's everywhere. It was a bad situation. And I heard Mr. Jenkins say, class, can I have your attention? And he started calling out students. He called out Darby, and he called out Corey, and he called out Sharon, and called out Tanya. And he lined all these people up, and he began to point out the positive differences of each individual. He told the class that this is a good trait, and that's a good trait, and this is a good talent. And I heard what I didn't want to hear. I heard Mr. Jenkins say, Darren, would you come here? And I'm thinking, here we go again. I'm going to be humiliated by a teacher. But his voice was different than the voice of my first grade teacher. I remember walking up there, wiping my face, trying to get myself presentable. He put his arm around me and he said, this is Darren's difference. In fact, Darren is no different than anybody else. I mean, from that moment on, everything changed. It's a cool story that before we get out of this course, I'm going to tell you about me connecting with my fourth grade teacher, Mr. Jenkins, and having a sit-down interview with him as I was doing a motivational speech at a school in Nevada. It's really a cool story. But that day, his voice changed my life. I went into junior high, high school. My arm almost became the school mascot. I mean, we had that much fun. I remember in 7th grade, I ran for the student body vice president in the 7th grade of the class. I think it was 7th grade class, student body president or something like that. And my dad was my campaign manager, and he drew me a poster and had a sleeve hanging down. It said, vote for Sarge. He'll be your right-hand man, because that's all he can be. Life changed the moment a voice like Mr. Jenkins came into my life. Some of you that are watching this today have allowed voices to hinder you, limit you, keep you locked down in a prison, shame, guilt, whatever. History is replete with stories of those that overcame their limitations, who pushed past the confines of limits in their bodies, the voices of friends, the voices of family. So many that arrived to a place of success pushed past those things. One in particular comes to my mind. See if you can figure out who this is as I relate the story. At the age of 7, he had to go to work to help support his family. At 9, his mother died. At 22, he lost his job as a store clerk. At 23, he went into debt and became a partner in a small store. At 26, his partner died, leaving him a huge debt. By the age of 35, he had been defeated twice when running for a seat in Congress. At the age of 37, he won the election. At 39, he lost his re-election bid. At 41, his 4-year-old son died. At 42, he was rejected for a land officer role. At 45, he ran for the Senate and lost. At 47, he was defeated for the nomination for vice president. At 49, he ran for Senate again. Guess what? Lost again. At the age of 51, he was elected president of the United States. During his second term of office, he was assassinated, but his name lives on among the greats in the United States history. And we all know that person is Abraham Lincoln. That just blows my mind. It's such a powerful story about the tenacity, if you will, to push past limits. How many times had he failed in just the brief history that I gave you? Voices that no doubt came into his mind, his heart, his life, told him to stop. But he pushed past those voices and ended up being someone that we all recognize and even talk about today. Somebody else that comes to mind is a man by the name of Henry Ford. In the mid-1890s, Ford began building his first vehicle made with bicycle parts and a combustion engine. He worked on it in a shop behind the rental house where he and his wife had lived, and he believed that people's capacity for travel could be increased. Of course, he faced his share of doubters. People thought that he couldn't do it. Others advised against it because they believed that there weren't enough roads built to accommodate a vehicle that powered itself. However, Ford was undaunted. In 1896, Ford completed his project. He named his vehicle the quadricycle. However, he'd made one small miscalculation. It was too big to fit through the doorway of his shop. So what did he do? He knocked bricks out of the wall in order to get it out. He wasn't going to allow the door's lack of capacity to limit his capacity. What doors are you hiding behind that are limiting you? Trying to build your life without removing your limitations and increasing your capacity is like building a car in a small shed and being unwilling to knock out the wall to get the car out on the road. We've got to stop listening to voices of limitations. Here's another voice that I think we need to talk about. It's the voice of negativity. You know, so often the first word most children learn is the word no. We all have had, I have 3 children. I think their first word, I wish it would have been dad or daddy, but no, it was no. That's common. Why is that? What causes us to always side with the negative before the positive? Yeah, we all have those types of people in our lives, people that always see the glass half empty instead of half full. People that believe, if you're standing outside talking to them, commenting on how nice, man, it's a nice day today, they'll say, just wait, clouds are coming. To live with negativity is to never see the possibilities of what could be in your life, your family, your relationships, your future. Now, I had a choice to make when it came to the voice of my first grade teacher. I could have listened to it. I could have bought into the negative future, a negative future that was in front of me, or I could have refused what was spoken over me and continue to press on and move on in my life. Let me tell you about something that happened later in my life. I was 19. I was dating a girl who was 23. I know what you're thinking. I've always had it. Yes, I know. I began to get serious, and we started talking about the future together. And I remember one day I had planned a big day that, you know, she's going to go down and meet my grandmother, and my grandmother was going to make famous Nanny's fried chicken. That was my grandmother's name. We called her Nanny. Now, I should have known when she didn't eat the fried chicken or rave about the fried chicken. I should have known something was up, because Nanny made some bomb fried chicken. But I had a day planned. We were going to go to the beach. We were going to spend some time together. And I remember sitting on the beach. Things had gotten kind of weird in our relationship. She said things that just kind of didn't set well with me, and about, you know, my arm and things. But one day she lit in. We're sitting on the beach, and she says, "Darren, you are a freak of society." She says, I see people stare at you when we walk into a room. I wanted to tell her, no, they're not staring at my arm. It's because I'm extremely handsome. But I didn't say that. I just let her go. Then she said these words. She said, "I'm not sure I could marry you because I may one day want to know what it feels like to be held by a man with 2 hands." I'll be honest with you. In my brain, the first thought I had was throw sand in her face. But my dad had taught me better than that. But in my brain, instantly, the thought came to my mind, I'm not the one with the handicap. You are. And yes, I broke up with her and dumped her, and I'm glad I did. But hear me today. If every voice in your life is negative, you need to tune those voices out. You may not be able to eliminate that person with that voice in your life. They may be someone that you're related to, but you can quit taking their advice. I mean, I may not be able to silence what someone is saying about me, but that doesn't mean I have to let that voice influence me. The third voice that I think we need to talk about is the voice of mediocrity. This is huge. Life often appears much safer if you never risk anything. The voice of mediocrity will try to confine you to a couch of ease, never getting up to try anything at all. And if you stay confined to the comfort zones of your life and you never attempt to get beyond those limits, you will live and finish life. Yes, you will, but you will never make a difference in anybody else's world or the world that you choose to live in. A comfort zone is basically just a fancy term for allowing yourself to remain in the status quo. Mediocrity, and I want to say this because it's important, mediocrity is nobody else's fault. Mediocrity is a personal choice. Columnist Maureen Dowd says this: the minute you settle for less than you deserve, you get even less than you settled for. There's a poem by an author by the name of William Arthur Ward that has been one of my favorites that speaks to what I'm really kind of trying to get across right now. I placed it in your workbook there because I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. It's called To Risk. To laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach out to another is to risk involvement. To expose feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas and dreams before a crowd is to risk their loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. But risks must be taken because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he cannot learn, feel, change, grow, or live. Chained by his servitude is a slave who has forfeited all freedom. Only a person who risks is free. The pessimist complains about the wind. The optimist expects it to change, and the realist adjusts his sails. Those are powerful words spoken that I think need to daily be incorporated into your life. I love what Nelson Mandela said. There is no passion to be found playing small, in settling for a life that's less than the one you are capable of living. This is the reason why I wrote this course. You were not created to be average. You were never intended for your life to be one of mediocrity. You are, as the scripture says, fearfully and wonderfully made. So get up out of the rut that you find yourself in and push past those limitations, that voice that keeps telling you, just sit back down and settle. The fourth voice that I think is very prevalent in today's world is the voice of approval. This voice is huge. In this current culture that we find ourselves in, this voice is massive. Social media. Now, I'm not here to talk about or give you a lesson on social media, but it needs to be said. Social media has caused more people to get their identity through likes and hearts and emojis. Thumb up. I can't, sorry, my heart's broken. I can't do a heart. But you know what I'm saying. It's caused what I call approval addiction. We are addicted to the approval of others. How often do you click on a post that you have put on Instagram just to see how many likes it's gotten? If you need the approval of others to make you feel like you are somebody, then you're listening to the wrong voice. You have an addiction of approval. This social media, it's madness, to be honest with you. Young people, students, young adults, they're getting their identity and their purpose from what other people think of them. You don't need their approval. You don't need someone else's approval to do something great with your life. If I waited for someone's approval of me, I'd have stayed locked in a prison of shame, locked in a prison of, knock my glasses around, locked in a prison of feeling like I can't do anything. You know, as I mentioned before, I can't shuffle a deck of cards. I go everywhere. I could have just stayed locked. If I would have waited for someone to stamp their approval on my life, I wouldn't be making this course today. I wouldn't be speaking to thousands every single year in the last 25 plus years of my life. Our approval doesn't come from a post. Our approval doesn't come from Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, whatever y'all are on these days. TikTok. I don't understand that one, but by the time you watch this, TikTok will probably not even be a thing. Our approval needs to come from God, the one who created you. Finally, and this ties very closely to the voice of approval, another voice that often causes us to remain average is the voice of comparison. We live our lives trying to compare ourselves with other people. You know, let's get honest. Social media, people that post on there and Instagram, those are the highlights. I tell some people I don't even have to go on vacation anymore. I can just watch your Facebook feed or your Instagram. You're posting your food, you're posting where you're staying, you're posting what you're buying. I can live vicariously through somebody else. But our problem with that is we begin comparing ourselves. We begin listening to voices of comparison. I believe when you step out to be what God desires of you, there is going to be a supernatural strength that comes into play to help you become everything that you were created to become. But here's the deal. God is never going to help you be somebody else. I'm going to let that hang there for a minute. You're never going to get help from the divine to just be somebody else. This is why it's important to remember how unique you truly are to God. If you want to achieve a level of success in your life, if you want to move from average to awesome, you've got to realize something. To achieve a dream and become awesome as the person you were created to become, you must stretch to go beyond average. You must push past these voices. You need to turn down the noise a little bit. You cannot reach a dream, a successful life, and remain safely limited by voices, mediocrity, negativity, approval, comparison. Now, as these voices are all around us, it's important to remember those are not my identity. Those are just voices. People that are saying things that don't really know who I am. I've heard them all my life. One of my favorite authors is a lady by the name of Brene Brown. If you've ever read any of her stuff, you'll know what I'm talking about. She writes in her book, Daring Greatly. This is a speech by Theodore Roosevelt that he gave in Paris, France on April 23rd, 1910. I want to read it to you as I close this module because I think it's important. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, and who comes up short again and again. Because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. It's going to take a little bit of work to move from average to awesome. But if you'll go on this journey and not stop, don't stop at this lesson. We've got some awesome, think of that, awesome. We got some awesome lessons ahead. They're going to help you become the person you were intended to be. I can't wait to see you in our next lesson. Thanks for tuning in. Watch this as many times as you can. Make sure to take notes. We'll see you in our next module.